And then we hear this gurgling noise. And I'm like, I've never heard that before. That's not right. And as we're standing there, like all this soap like spurts out at us because I plugged in the pump backwards.
Oh my gosh.
No. So from that day, all my technicians would call me Wrong Way Rochester.
What a great nickname. In this episode, you'll get to know Tammeca Rochester, the cyclist entrepreneur, and you'll hear the story of how she transitioned from developing household products like Softsoap to creating the first cycling studio in Harlem. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is My Success Show. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show. This is where I speak to some of the most successful people I've met in my journey through life. And as I'm interviewing them, I'm looking for universal principles of success to help both you and my family. In case it's your first time here, I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've taught millions of people how to be successful through my online courses, particularly on LinkedIn Learning. With this show, I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to explore stories of how people became successful so that I could find universal principles of success. Originally, I wanted to do it just to help my kids, but really this show is for everyone so that you can learn those principles and so that you can make their success story a part of your success story. So as you listen to today's episode, look for something you can do. An action you can take. Do something this week, today, tomorrow, to make my guest's story a part of your life. And you're going to want to do that with today's guest. Tammeca Rochester is the CEO and founder of Harlem Cycle, the first and only indoor cycling studio in Harlem. Her advocacy for wellness has been recognized in the New York Times and Essence magazine. Rochester holds an MBA from NYU Stern, specializing in marketing and entrepreneurship. And she has dual bachelor degrees in mechanical engineering and mathematics from Georgia Tech and Spelman College. Tammeca amplifies her impact through TRG International, which empowers underserved communities and young people in South Africa. Tammeca, I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Dave. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, when I saw your story and the business that you've created, and I thought, man, this is really unique. This is really interesting. I think people are going to be excited about it and your entrepreneurial path. So are you in Harlem right now?
I am. I'm at home in Harlem.
Oh, that's great. I love New York. What a wonderful place to live and all the different things you can see just by going a block or two and everything changes, right?
Yeah, especially in Harlem. Like every couple of blocks is like a whole new everything, like new restaurants, new scenes, new everything.
Well, the next time I go there, I'm going to have to reach out to you and have you show me the best restaurants in Harlem.
Oh, and I'm a foodie, Dave, so come prepared.
Oh.
We're going to eat a lot.
Great. Me too. So let's dive into this. And I always like to start with every guest with the same question, which is, when you were in your teenage years and you first started forming ideas about what your career might be, what did you think you would be when you grew up?
I really wanted to be a firefighter. And part of it was because my next door neighbor was a firefighter and he'd have all his firefighter friends over and I'd see them from my window. They just looked so cool. They were just like, everybody in the community was like watching too. So I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing in the world. Plus they help people and like, who doesn't love a firefighter?
So it was beyond just the standard kid answer of I want to be a firefighter. Like you actually were influenced by firefighters when you were growing up.
Absolutely. And he was like the best neighbor to, like, even to this day, as my mom still lives in our childhood home, he comes over and helps my mom cut the grass. So he was genuinely the best neighbor. And so having that kind of influence from someone who was just kind-hearted, I wanted to be exactly like him.
And what was the school situation like when you were growing up? What were you studying? What were you interested in?
So I went to my high school was for science and engineering. So I actually, after wanting to be a firefighter, I always had a natural path towards science and engineering. Math was always my favorite subject in school. I had a natural affinity towards it. Anything with math and science, I was there. So I went to a math and science high school. And then from there, took that same education on to college. So studying math and science again in college.
That's really interesting because I don't see many connections now to what you studied. Yet I have learned that there's always an influence. Everything that we learned in the past influences what we do now. So what were some lessons about business and about life that you gained while studying math and science?
Yeah, well, I do think there is a connection. So though I'm in fitness, I will always tell people I am an engineer at heart, because what engineers, like, we're problem solvers. And that's literally what I do every day, from fixing a bike to problem solving what's going on in one of my clients' lives to, problem solving what's going on with our instructors. So there's always a connection to me to back to engineering. So that has stayed with me this whole time.
Talk to me about what it means to be an engineer and approach problems with the mindset of an engineer.
So I worked many years as an engineer before I made the career switch over. But for me, it was about approaching things from a wider view and not from just that one set situation. And it's like taking a full scope of everything that's going on. And then from there, finding a solution that meets the needs of everyone involved, all of your stakeholders. Because I worked in consumer goods actually when I was doing my career. And so my stakeholders were the marketing team, the sales team, and then of course the plant managers who would be making this product. And sometimes it was not always in agreement with what's going on with marketing team. And so it's like taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, and then finding a solution that meets everyone's needs.
And I know you have a son at home. Are those principles like of engineering things that you teach him when he's confronting issues and challenges? How do you teach him how to think more like that?
Well, I tried, Dave, but he's 12.
Yeah, sure. I know.
The good thing is he has a natural affinity towards math and science as well. Like, that's his top subjects in school. He's number one in his class when it comes to math. Like, that's great. But trying to teach a 12-year-old problem solving instead of him just trying to argue with me over every little thing has been a challenge. Now, that I must admit.
And there is that thing with parent and child where the teachers can teach him something, the sports coaches can teach him something, but the parent tries to say something. It's like, oh, I'm not listening to you. What's that?
Absolutely. Oh, no, my son will in your face be like, if he asks you a question, he'll be like, let me check Google. Like, he doesn't believe your answer.
Well, I guess that's part of the problem solving process too, right?
Absolutely.
So to get 2 degrees, that's pretty remarkable. Did you go to Georgia Tech and Spelman? This was on site. What was that like? So you grew up in Harlem, or did you grow up somewhere else?
I know, actually, I grew up in Atlanta.
Okay.
I didn't travel far for school, though I lived on campus every year. So the program was a dual degree program. So you spend 3 years at Spelman. You have to complete your science degree. So for mine was mathematics. You have to complete your degree within 3 years. And then from there, you transition over into your engineering school, and you have to complete your mechanical engineering courses in 2 years. The good thing is your first 2 years of any school are those basic English, math classes. So those credits will transfer over to your engineering degree. So your first 2 years of being a math major and an engineering major are actually the same. And that's how you're able to do the 5 years. I will say it was a very stressful time in life. I was not having all the fun that everyone else was in college, though I had an amazing time. I don't know if I would even recommend it for my son.
Okay. When you say you were having more stress, was it because of things that were happening to you, or was it because of the mindset that you had going into it? Were you creating your own stress in that situation?
I would say it was a combination. One is, having to finish your degree faster than anyone else is a challenge in itself. Then I was on full academic scholarship, so I had to maintain a certain GPA, which was another level of stress that was, kind of outside influence. But then also having this internal goal of I want to be done with this in 5 years. I don't want to extend this. This is a 5-year program and I want to be done and be out here.
Yeah. As a time management guy, as a productivity guy, I see that happen a lot, that the stress that we experience isn't because of what we're trying to accomplish. It's that we're trying to accomplish too much in too short of a period of time. And that sounds kind of what was going on here for you.
Absolutely. When most people take 4 years to do each of these degrees, so that would have been a total of 8, I tried to do it in 5.
Wow. Yeah. But you did it, which is pretty darn impressive. Who was a mentor or a teacher who had impact on you during that time?
I would say she's still my favorite teacher to this day, was Dr. Shaw. She was my calculus teacher at Spelman. And now when I got to Spelman, everyone was like, do not take Dr. Shaw. She's the hardest math teacher out there. She's a challenge. And something happened where like she was the only class that fit into my schedule. So I had to take her. Because again, I'm on an aggressive timeline to finish these classes. So I don't have time to skip around and wait till next semester where something opens up. I had to take her at this time and get it done. I took Dr. Shaw and she challenged me in ways I could have never imagined. And when I left her class, we were so much more advanced than any of the other calculus classes. But also she taught me how to approach things differently. Like her way of teaching calculus and her way of problem solving, like every problem set that we got was just much more advanced than everyone else because she's like, I gave you the fundamentals. Now I need you to think it through and you can find the solution, which I think set me up for going into engineering.
In what way? How did that influence that?
So in engineering, your final exam is 2 or 3 questions at most. And you get 2 hours to complete 2 or 3 questions. And it's like, well, sure, you should be done in no time. Absolutely not. It took me 2 to 3 hours to do those 2 to 3 questions. But because it's about learning the fundamentals and then thinking through a solution. And so, Dr. Shaw gave me that like framework of, okay, it's not going to just be in front of you, but think through what all the next steps are and how this all pieces together.
Yeah, there are a couple of things I love about that. First of all, what you've said several times now, which is once you know the fundamentals, it's easier to solve problems because you're grounded in those basics. The other thing that I'm picking up on, though, is you developed confidence that you could solve difficult problems. And we're not just talking about engineering or math. We're talking about just a general life lesson that when you encounter obstacles, and boy, as an entrepreneur, you encounter obstacles all the time, right? Yeah.
So many obstacles then.
Exactly. But I think that gives you confidence to say, I can solve difficult problems. You've built that up from the very beginning, thanks to a teacher like Dr. Shaw.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you were. I'm like, I owe her a lot. Yes. Dr. Shaw gave me that foundation.
Yeah. I've noticed that several times in my life where I didn't fully comprehend how influential someone or something was. And then I re-encounter it and I go, oh my gosh, I use that all the time in my life.
Yeah.
So let's move on to then the first job that you got coming out of college. You said it was in science and engineering. What were you doing?
Yeah, after I graduated, I worked for Colgate-Palmolive as a process engineer in their personal care department. It's fantastic. I got to travel the world, got to see how different plants operated, got to make all kinds of products. It was wonderful.
What is a process engineer for those who are unfamiliar? What do you do?
So I was in charge of designing and implementing the different equipment and products for manufacturing of the different products.
What's a product that you worked on that people would be familiar with?
My first was Softsoap, the Softsoap line.
Oh, my goodness. I wouldn't be able to live without Softsoap. It's like the most important thing in our house. Where's the Softsoap?
Where's the Softsoap? Yes. And it's funny because you don't realize like how everyday products are getting to shelf. And you're like, somebody had to make that. Some plant somewhere around the world had to make that. And it was really fun to see products that you use every day and then now be on the making side of it.
So were you managing people, or how many people did you work with in your team?
As an engineer, I work with a lot of people at the plants. When we did like global launches, they all had their manager and I came in as the designer for the things. So we would buy the equipment, we would spec it out, and then we'd come in and it'd be passed over to the local teams to install it. And then we'd come in and run our tests.
Okay. What is a story or a moment from those early days in your career that you replay in your mind, that you look back and you say, that was really interesting that happened, or maybe even, I wish I hadn't done that? Is there a moment that stands out to you from that time?
So I had a really amazing team. All of the technicians that work with me were always fun. Like we'd come in at 7 a.m. We'd have breakfast together. We'd tease each other when we're down at the labs. Whenever I brought them new projects, it was always like a good time. And I remember this one project where like my technician, who normally was the one who would set up the equipment for me, I would send them down the specs of what we're running. They'd set it up. I'd come in and run the test. And he had something to do. And I was like, oh, it's fine. I'll go down and do it myself. No big deal. I'll just meet you down there at this time. So I go down, I set it up, and we plug it in. And then we hear this gurgling noise. And I'm like, I've never heard that before. That's not right. And as we're standing there, like all this soap like spurts out at us because I plugged in the pump backwards.
Oh my gosh.
So from that day, all my technicians would call me Wrong Way Rochester.
What a great nickname.
I was like, I've never physically plugged the stuff in myself. Like I would give you all these like fancy equipment specs and come in and suddenly it'd all be installed. But to physically go down there and do it yourself, I was like, oh yeah, things are not as easy as they seem.
Yeah. So I'm going to draw a parallel, and I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with this. That's something that I run into as a business owner, that sometimes I say, oh, I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to take care of this for someone. And I mess it up really bad.
Terribly.
Because I haven't been the person, and I think, oh, I'm the owner. I'm the person in charge. I know how to do this. And I go in, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And then I end up apologizing to everyone because I just made their life harder because I did things the wrong way. So I think there's an element of trusting people and trusting the training and processes and systems that you've given them and allow them to do that work rather than to just kind of insert myself into everyday work.
Absolutely. And I've seen with my team, like they know how to do it better. Like I may have been the one who designed the process or have been the one who first like implemented it. But over time, when they're the ones who are truly in charge and who are doing it day by day, they've even made changes to the process that I implemented that are working better for them, and to just trust that they know what they're doing and get out their way.
Okay. So you worked how many years as a process engineer?
About 8.
And then as I was looking at your bio, you transitioned to being a brand manager, correct?
Yeah.
That's a pretty big switch. I mean, now we're talking marketing, we're talking sales. How did you make that transition? How did that even occur?
So I started going to NYU at nights while I was working as an engineer, and that's how I got my MBA. But it all started because I worked on a lot of projects where we were designing and re-equipping all these plants to manufacture these products that were supposed to go to market, that were supposed to be amazing. Even as we were like changing over the plant, making $1 million equipment decisions, I'm like, this is a terrible product idea. Like, who is making the call on this stuff? And so I said it a couple of times to my manager. I was like, how are we getting these products? Like, what was the consumer research? And he was like, you should sit in some of the marketing meetings. Because he was like, we just make the products. We don't get to decide what products to make. I sat in on some of the marketing meetings and I thought, oh no, y'all need some help. And not to be arrogant, but I was like, I don't know if this is the right decision we should be making, because not only are they not as tuned into the supply chain as they should be when making a product decision that's going to make $4 million, but we just redesigned a plant that costs $12 million. So the math isn't mathing. And so I went to business school at night because I was like, okay, I'm just more interested in like, how are these decisions being made? I went to my boss after I finished business school. I was like, okay, I want to do just the internship in marketing, but just the internship. Because if I don't like it, I want you to take me back. Like, I want to be able to walk right back into this job. So I did the internship, loved the team I worked with. And I was like, oh, wow, I really feel like I am making a bigger difference because I have the supply chain background. And I was able to work a little bit closer with the supply chain people and marketing and kind of bridging the gap. So it was a transition, but I felt like I came a little bit more prepared than most because I had that supply chain background.
Yeah, there's so much about that story I love. So I want to unpack some of it for people who are listening. The first, and this isn't going to apply to everyone, I try to search for universal principles for everyone who's listening. So first, I'm just going to say this might not apply to everyone, but it's still fascinating, which is the disconnect that I see so often between marketing and research and development, right? Marketing is like, this is a great idea. If we can sell this, we're going to sell all of it. But if you don't have a background or understanding of what it's going to take to actually create that, you're just making empty promises to people.
Yeah.
And that leads to the second thing, which is I love what you did, where you started to see connections. And we go back to that thing, like, remember the engineering and the math comes into play. So you were starting to see that the math wasn't working out, but you already had the mindset of entrepreneurship. And what I mean by that is entrepreneurs see connections that others do not see. You saw that there was this need and no one was creating that position. You just saw it and you went and took that internship because you saw the need there. Is that a pattern of your life to see those kinds of connections and then just jump in?
You know, I've never actually like sat down and made that connection, but absolutely. That's how Harlem Cycle got here, was seeing a need and saying, okay, we need a solution here. But wow, I love this, Dave. You're bringing out so many revelations here.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs have a certain way of looking at the world, which is other people aren't seeing the need. I see it. I'm going to fill it. And I think that last part is important too. It's not just seeing it, but having the wherewithal and the mindset to execute, to actually make it happen. So I just want to stay on this for a little bit. You stayed there not too long as the senior brand manager at Colgate-Palmolive. What other kinds of connections did you make during that time? What other problems did you solve?
Well, I stayed in marketing for about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And moved around from different teams. So went from oral care to personal care to home care. But it was a very stressful time, honestly. Going from different teams, marketing is a lot more aggressive, honestly, than engineering. It felt like I had gone to a whole different company. When I'm in engineering, everyone's kind of a team. We want to get it done. We want to make sure this product gets to market. In marketing, it's like, it was very competitive. Like, I needed to get my product to market before your product, even though we're working for the same company. And so with that, I was like, I need to work out. I'm stressed. It's just too much going on. And then I started doing cycling as like my go-to stress reliever. So my revelation during this time was, I have to figure out how to take care of me, because this job was not going to do it.
So you were allowing the corporate pressure to sort of neglect your own well-being during that time.
Absolutely. Late nights all the time, constantly stressed about just the perfect deck of how to pitch your ideas to management. It was just very stressful.
And how long were you using someone else's program for cycling until you started to think, maybe I should create my own?
I think I was cycling for about 3 or 4 years before I was like, why am I going downtown to cycle? It just didn't make sense anymore. I was going to these studios because they were close to work. You know, I could go in on my lunchtime, come right back out, or it was right after work. I could go in and come right back out. But then weekends would come and I'm like, I have more free time on the weekends to work out, but there was no place in Harlem to go to. I found the YMCA, which was local. And I must say the YMCA had the music that I loved. So it was great to have like a connection back into the space. But it was like I had gotten familiar with boutique spaces that have amenities and have a great way of booking your bike and ways of coming in and just feeling welcomed in. And the YMCA didn't have that. And I was like, I'm always like sacrificing. It always felt like a sacrifice no matter what. If I was downtown, it was like the music is terrible. I don't feel very much of a connection here, but at least it's nice and it's convenient. I go uptown and it's like, oh, the music's here, but it's not nice and it's not convenient, you know? So it's like always a trade-off. I thought, even with my health, why am I trading off? Like, you wouldn't trade off with your doctor, right?
Yeah. So there we go. We're talking about that connection, right? Seeing something that other people don't see and saying, hey, I can create that. I can provide that. That is very much an entrepreneurial mindset, but it's also an engineering mindset, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the two complement each other. So where did the idea come into your head, or what was the moment where you said, I'm going to move from being annoyed about this to actually creating a solution to it? What was the spark that said, to heck with it, I'm going to start creating this business?
So I was out for a run one morning. I'm just running around and I go for a nice little jog and I see this sign in the commercial space and it was like, for rent. And I thought, oh, this would make a perfect like cycling studio. If there was a cycling studio right here, I could just run to it, could run back home. And then as I kept the run going, I was like, well, you know, if they would just move uptown, like I was talking through the idea in my mind, like, well, if a studio just came uptown, it'd be great. It would be wonderful. And then as I said that, I was like, but I don't want a downtown studio uptown. I want a studio that fits this culture, who has the music that I like, that's all about communities. But I need a space here. So as I finished that jog, I came home and I was like, let me write this down. Like, so I wrote the ideas down. And that was like late October, early November. I feverishly spent like the next weekend just coming up with a business plan. I was like, is this even a reasonable idea? I reached out to a broker just to get pricing on like what commercial spaces were, just to put it in there. And the broker was like, if you're serious, call me back. So I had at the time my fiance look over my business plan. He was like, it's a solid business plan. Like, if these numbers are true, it's a solid plan. So I called the broker back.
I want to pause on that for just a second. So you wrote a plan to go along with this.
Yeah. And the first thing I did was look at numbers. I went straight to the financial plan and was like, let me call this broker, just get a sense of what real rent is in this, because I had no idea. I had never owned a commercial space. And so I started with the financials and I was like, this could work.
That is so important. I really, really want to emphasize that, because so many entrepreneurs, I've got this great idea, and they go out, they get a website and they create their logo and all this stuff. It's like, you're way, 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 way too far ahead of this process.
Yeah.
You need to do the math. You need to get the numbers. You need to do some research before jumping into this. In fact, I'll just do a brief plug for one of my own courses on LinkedIn Learning. It's called Entrepreneurship: Finding and Testing Your Business Idea. Before you jump in, test it, get the numbers. It sounds like that's exactly what you were doing, Tammeca.
Exactly. I did. Before I even wrote down like the name of what the company could be, I was like, let's look at some numbers.
Yeah. And what did the numbers say?
The numbers said I had a solid plan. Because I put in, it was very lowball estimates. It was like at 40% capacity, we could still be in the black.
Yeah. Well, and that's key too, is not to be overly optimistic, but to actually be very pessimistic and make sure that those numbers look good with that pessimism.
Exactly. I was like, 40%, I know at least I could get 50. So at 40%, if I'm good, then we're good.
Yeah. Okay. So were there any naysayers? Was there any hesitation? People saying, don't do this, don't jump into it? What was the environment that you were around when you decided to do this?
So I had the idea late October, early November. February 1st, I signed the lease. April 1st, I had my first class. So I didn't give people time to be naysayers because they didn't even know it was coming. It was like we opened up and we were here. I mean, after we opened up, there were definitely people who walked in and were like, oh, I had this idea years ago. And I'm like, cool. Now we're here. Yes.
But you executed on it.
But I executed. Yeah.
Yeah, you did it. Okay. So sometimes when you put something new like that into an area where it doesn't exist, you have to educate your market. You've got to explain to them why this is a good thing. So did you feel like that happened? It had to happen? Or did you feel like you just put it in and everybody's like, oh, we have been needing this. Like you said, I had this idea for this business.
I wish it was option 2, but it was definitely an education series. We definitely had people who were showing up with their bicycles because they were like, oh, it said it was a cycle studio. And I'm like, not a bicycle studio. Then we had people who just weren't familiar with the studio process. They're like, well, I bought a class. I'm just going to show up on any day. And I'm like, that's not how that works. You have to book your class and you can't just show up at any random time. You have to come when there's a class, because it's not the gym where gym is you have a membership and you just show up whenever.
Yeah.
We definitely had people who were just like, I've seen cycling ads and nobody on these ads look anything like me, or cycling just doesn't seem like it's something that people of color do. We've had all those comments and we've had to educate everyone about all of the things.
How long did you hold on to your job before going 100% into the business?
I held on to my job for a whole year.
Okay.
It was a very stressful first year, but I held on because, again, we weren't in the black actually until about 8 months in.
Which is honestly pretty fast. I want to illustrate that for people because sometimes people think, oh, we're going to be profitable day one, but it takes quite a while. So 8 months actually says a lot about how you set things up properly. If you're comfortable, talk to me about the finances of it. Were you funding it initially on your own? Were you bootstrapping it? Did you get a loan? How did that work?
Yeah, it was definitely bootstrapped. It was bootstrapped between me and my fiance. I pulled out of my savings from Colgate. I was paying bills from my Colgate salary, and I was borrowing from my fiance whenever I was coming up short.
No matter what your career is, your foundation of success begins with one thing: effective time management. And thanks to the generosity of Microsoft, you can get my entire course, Time Management Fundamentals, for free on LinkedIn Learning. Go to davegift.com to get your free access now. This is the course that millions around the world have used to become more productive and reduce stress. Everyone from Fortune 500 executives to freelancers to students. Now, it's the same coaching I've provided in person for tens of thousands of dollars per day, but you can get it for free on LinkedIn Learning. You don't need to provide anything to access it. No credit card, no email. Just go to davegift.com and start learning. Thank you so much, Microsoft and LinkedIn Learning, for your partnership. DaveGift.com. And I'm assuming that put a lot of pressure on you initially.
Absolutely. Because I had a 4-year-old son and I was like, we can't fail because I can't have my son homeless. And it's not like I didn't go out for bank loans. I tried for bank loans. They wouldn't give it to me. I got my first loan 2 years in, and it was from a CDFI, and it was for a very small amount, about $10,000.
And how were you educating yourself about how to be successful in entrepreneurship? Because I'm not saying that what you were doing was totally removed from what you were doing before, but there is a whole set of skills and knowledge that one has to acquire in order to build a successful business. So what was your process of going out and seeking help for that?
I read a lot of books, honestly, and I connected with a lot of the business owners in Harlem. Like, I would stop in for coffee. I'd stop in just to chat. I'd reach out to them on their Instagram and saying, hey, I'm a new business owner. Would love to just chat and come in and introduce myself. I will say, though I came from a marketing background, I rarely use any of the skills that I used at this Fortune 500 company in my small business.
Yeah, because you have an unlimited budget almost.
Right.
With a major Fortune 500 company. Everything is tight. Everything has to be bootstrapped and guerrilla marketing.
And when I was in marketing for Colgate, there was 10,000 agencies doing all the work for me. Like, there was someone managing the social media. There was someone managing the sales. There was someone managing this. So it's not like you were physically out there grassroots going from shop to shop handing out flyers at Colgate. Absolutely not. But that is what you do as a small business owner.
Yeah. So you mentioned you read a lot of books. What are a few of them that have been most influential in your mind and helped you the most?
So Profit First was a good one for me.
Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, who, by the way, this weekend I'm going to a little networking group, just like 5 or 6 of us. So I'm going to be hanging out with him. So he's a great author. He's got a great podcast as well. I've been on that podcast. So his books are fantastic for entrepreneurship. Are there any other books that come to mind that you felt were helpful?
Yes. 10X is easier than 2X.
Okay.
Dan Sullivan.
A bunch of Dan Sullivan stuff?
Yeah. A lot of it is more on not necessarily strategy, but mindset.
Sure.
And once I got the mindset, I was like, oh, I can figure out the strategy.
And what did you gain from Profit First?
So for me, Profit First was really how I should be looking at all of our finances, how I should be looking at all of our programs, how I should be looking at, our strategy into our programs. Because when I first opened, I was like, we're all about community. We're going to do a lot of community free events. And it was like, who's going to pay for this? And it does have a cost. And your community will know that everything has a cost, but you have to pay it. But also how I pay myself first and how I make sure that there's money set aside for taxes and make sure there's money set aside for actual growth.
Yeah. And this is something that I talk about. So I wrote a book on small business. I'll send you a copy. It's called The Focused Business, How Entrepreneurs Can Triumph Over Chaos. And one of the things I talk about is so many of these awards, like the Inc. 500, right? The Inc. 500 is awarded to the businesses with the highest growth rate in terms of sales. That's like awarding the championship to the basketball team that scored the most points, regardless of how many points were scored against them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense. What really matters is what is the net income? Sales minus expenses. That's what really matters. And it sounds like that was something that you focused on in your business or have continued to focus on.
That's so true because I've talked to so many business owners and they're like, oh, well, I make this with sales. And I'm like, okay, so what's your operating expenses like? Because I don't care about your sales. I can make $1 million, but if my expenses are 1.2 million, I'm not profitable.
Exactly. Going back to your story and something that you do, I really want to highlight this too. The power of networking, the power of connecting with other like-minded people, but you did it really interesting in a very interesting way, which is you reached out to the businesses on Instagram. So you didn't wait for someone to come to you. You didn't even necessarily there are networking groups. You didn't go to one of those groups. You said, I'm going to create my own group of people. I'm going to reach out to them directly. I love that you did that.
Yeah. And it would be me and my son who was 4. We'd walk into a coffee shop. I'd ask for the owner and just introduce myself, let them know I'm their neighbor. And we'd sit down. And I always say, if you want a small business owner to take some time, support their business. So I would make sure we're supporting that business. And everyone's excited to share. Like, once you support their business, of course they want to share.
Yeah. Have you done any strategic partnerships with them where you're both cross-promoting your businesses to each other's customer base?
Absolutely. We have partnerships with coffee shops. Like, if you take our morning class, you get a free cup of coffee at this coffee shop, or a smoothie joint we've done. We have a Black History Month fitness crawl coming up with us and in other studios, so we do a lot of cross promotion. I honestly believe that high tides raise all ships. And so we all need to just kind of work together.
Yeah, that's why I asked it, because I knew you were doing it. Having coached a lot of business owners, which isn't something I do these days, but I could just tell that you were going to really leverage that. And that is such a brilliant way to market your small business, which is to align with other businesses. It usually costs you nothing. You help everyone out, and it's a great way to bring in new customers to your business.
Absolutely. No, it's been really a great way of not only learning as a business owner, but a great way to connect with people who may not even known about your business.
Yeah. So what hasn't worked, Tammeca? What are a couple of challenges that you've faced, some stories that illustrate how difficult it's been for you?
When we first opened, I was like, okay, we want to just get the community in here. Let's just get them moving and they'll love us. So we, for our first week, gave out free classes. And after that, I made like your first class was only $12. That's nothing. That's less than a fast food meal. Like, let's be real. That's $12. We spend that in a coffee shop with no hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is all the people that got free classes from us, I have never seen them again in my life. All the people that did $12.50, they were hard to convert because we showed them that the value of our services was low.
Yes.
And so it was like, I learned very quickly, like, go after your target market and know that they will know the value of your service. Because free people are free people. Free people look for free stuff all the time and they don't ever plan on paying.
Right. You're not cultivating people who are used to paying for your service. And worse, people are going to refer people to you who also want free.
Exactly.
So you're encouraging more and more and more of that.
More and more freeness.
Yeah. So you said, the people who are going to pay. So what is like the profile of the kind of customer who is right for Harlem Cycle?
Yeah. So we actually, every time I look at like our client avatar, it's several of them, right? It's someone who is looking for wellness, someone who's looking for connection, someone who is okay with spending behind something that they know is valuable. So this is the person who is like, okay, I won't pay for foolishness, but if this is something I like, if this is for my wellness, I will invest behind it because they recognize that this investment is also saving them money on the back end when it comes towards medical bills. I would say we're 91% all women, but that's just part of the group fitness profile. So most group fitness people are women, but it's really people who are looking for connection. We hear from our clients all the time, like they've lived in this neighborhood for however many years and they haven't felt a connection that they knew their neighbors until they started taking classes, because that's where you're really connecting with people.
I like that too, because you're creating community, you're supporting the community as well as building a profitable business.
Absolutely.
Talk to me. I saw here that you are on the board for Start Small, Think Big. What is that? What are you doing with them?
Yeah. So Start Small, Think Big was a nonprofit that works within the community that helps small businesses with services that we wouldn't normally be able to afford. So it's services in financial, marketing, as well as legal. And the legal services I can't even describe how amazing it's been to work with them, because it was like people who drafted all of our contracts for our instructors, even our liability waiver. And as a startup business, you don't realize, but all that costs a lot of money to have an attorney create these kinds of contracts for you. That's a lot of money. But Start Small, Think Big is a nonprofit that you can go to as a small business, and they connect you with pro bono lawyers who are looking to help small businesses. I love the services so much. I was like, I have to help other small businesses. So I joined the board.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that illustrates too something that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing people. I want people who are giving back. I want people who are balanced and having fun and making time for those things outside of just profit and sales. So good for you for taking your success and using it to give back to people. I really admire that.
Oh, thank you.
So a couple of questions to sort of wrap things up. What do you see in the future for Harlem Cycle? Do you see expansion? Where do you want to take things over the next 5 years?
I always tell people we're Harlem to the world, but it's amazing that you asked this question because I was sitting with one of my instructors this weekend, and we do an instructor training program where we're training members of our community to get into a career within fitness and wellness. And he was like, Tammeca, there's no program like this out there. And I was like, oh, well, they're national certification programs. He was like, yeah, but they don't one-on-one hold your hand like we do to make sure that you can make it through an audition and get you ready to actually go to a studio. I thought, wow, I guess I didn't know because I've actually never auditioned to another studio but my own. But as he said, he was like, but think about it. Like, if you think of a cycling brand or a wellness brand that is nationally known and it's known for community and connection, there isn't one. And I said, oh, well, that's our goal.
Interesting.
And so that is the goal for Harlem Cycle, to be that nationally recognized brand that is known for community and connection.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's a great goal. And how do you see yourself accomplishing that?
I definitely see us opening a lot more locations. So physical locations for us to be able to really connect back with people. I see us targeting areas that have been left out of the conversation. Similar, like Harlem was just totally left out of the wellness space. And I see us kind of just growing our impact through other things. So we've expanded our retreats to now be international. We're going to Costa Rica this year.
Oh,
I see us expanding our on-demand platforms to be able to reach those people where we may not physically be able to get to. So just expanding all those pillars of the business.
and what are you going to do, or what are you doing now to make sure that as it grows and as your business is doing all these things, that you make time for something else, that you make time for family, that you make time for fun? What's your process, engineer, to solve that problem?
With me, it's a little bit easier because I have a 12-year-old son who forces you into like, we're going here, or I got a birthday party to go to, or we got this to go to. And it's amazing how you see what you want for your son. Like, I want my son to know that there's a balance between fun and work. And so he reflects it back to me when I'm like, oh, we have not taken a vacation. We need to do that. So I would say it's easy for me for the next 6 years until he goes off to college. And after that, I need to come up with a real strategy that's centered around my self-care.
Yeah. So he's the one always initiating it, or do you ever initiate these conversations?
Oh, it's both of us. It's definitely both of us. I think we've gotten him into a good routine where he's like, it's been like a couple of months when we going on vacation, or why aren't we doing this? So he keeps you accountable.
Yeah. Within the week itself. Now, I'm kind of putting a little pressure on you here, Tammeca, but that's the business coach in me. Within the week itself, so rather than just a vacation every 2 months, what do you do structurally in terms of time management to make sure that you're also doing things that are short term in between that and maintain that balance?
Yeah, that is a tough one day. I must say, I need some help.
Okay. I appreciate the honesty of that answer.
Yeah, I need some help. It's like there's weeks that it's like, oh my gosh, this has just been a terrible week. And then the next week I'm like, oh, but I booked a good yoga class and now I'm doing this. And so I don't know if I have a steady plan, but I need some help.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you one suggestion. And I know that your fiance too will like this. So I recommend that you have multiple oases. I have a book called The Power of Having Fun. And so that oasis is a place that you can count on. You want to have a daily oasis, a weekly oasis, a monthly, and a yearly. So every single day, you want that moment that you can look at and say, okay, 5:00 or whatever it is. I know that for 30 minutes, I'm going to do something else. Every week, I know that I've got a date with my fiance, and maybe I've also got a little activity with my son. So you've got that in the structure, in the schedule, and you can count on those small moments as well as those vacations and that sort of thing. And when you do that, I found with entrepreneurs, you're far more successful because that time off recharges the batteries, makes you a better problem solver, and then you can go back to the business and you really are much better because you took that time.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Now I'm like, what can be my daily oasis? I love it.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be expensive. Like one of my things, Tammeca, I just make sure that I spend some time watching some YouTube videos that make fun of movies. Like I like honest trailers and pitch meeting. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
No, I haven't now. I got to look them up.
Yeah. Just that 5-minute break recharges the batteries, makes everything more successful. Last question. If someone were asking you how to be successful as an entrepreneur, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned so far?
I would say go with your gut. That's definitely, I think, what has led me towards success, right? I don't even know if this is considered success yet, but I would say definitely go with your gut on anything from decision making to if something just doesn't feel right to if this person and your energy aren't matching, like just go with your gut on that. Because I think too often we feel there's like something isn't right and we're like, but I can't physically see what it is or I can't numerically recognize what it is, but there's something there. And I would say, whatever is there, listen to it.
Yeah, I have learned to pay attention to that feeling, especially if I start to think about doing something and I start to feel off. I start to feel like it's against who I am. That's a good sign to say, no, I need to stop doing it. The few times I've gone against that, I have always regretted it. So that's a great principle.
Always, right? Yeah, I've known like every time it's like it never works out, but it's a lesson we all have to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what I do at the end of every episode, Tammeca, is I encourage those who have been listening to take action, to choose something that they're going to do so that they make your success story a part of their success story. And kind of in the spirit of that oasis, I want it to be something they can do this week, not like a month from now, not a year from now, but do one thing. So I'm going to come up with 3 principles that I've learned from you, Tammeca, and then I'd like you to jump in at the end to share one principle of something someone can do this week. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. So the first thing that I wrote down was to approach problems like an engineer. And engineers assess all of the information. You look at all the possible inputs, all the possible problems, and you take a big picture view, and then you look for the process that can solve it. And I think too many people are in a rush to get through things. They're in a hurry and they're not taking the time to be analytical about the problems that they're experiencing. So if someone's listening to this is dealing with an issue, stop, assess everything, write it down, and look at things more objectively. The second one, and this is just kind of a little nugget that popped up with that story that you shared, but let people do their job, right? Let people do what they do best and don't try to be everything to everyone. Like you plugging that device in reverse and all the soap comes out. That really happens a lot when we don't properly delegate, when we don't allow other people to do what they do best. So if you're listening to this, assess what you're doing at work and say, is there something that I'm trying to do someone else's job for them? And stop. Delegate it to someone else. Let them do their job. Just a fun little principle, but I think that so many people miss out on that. And then the last thing is I would say, I think a lot of people think about starting a business. And if you're thinking about starting a business, create a business that fills an obvious need. Don't try to create a solution that's in search of a problem. Tammeca was looking at what was going on around her. She was noticing something that she wanted over and over and saw a simple business that solved a very, very clear issue. So think about what you're experiencing every day, an annoyance that you're having over and over, and see if you can't create a business that solves that problem rather than coming up with some crazy idea that you think is going to be great for the next app. That's not how most successful businesses start. All right, those are my 3. Tammeca, what would you add as a principle of success, something that someone can do right now to have more success?
I would say know your worth and charge your value so that you can attract your ideal client. So don't start with the discounts, start with the building from the clients that you actually want and charge them the value of your actual services.
I love it. And that is such a common mistake. I think too, that also applies, even if you don't have a business, knowing your worth and not discounting yourself and not bending over backwards to make someone else happy just because you feel like you need to do it. Know your worth, stick with your worth. It's a great principle.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, Tammeca, this has been a fantastic interview. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. the next time I'm out in New York, I am going to connect with you. So just be ready for that. It's coming.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to see you in the class, Dave.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you again for being here. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, it's not so much about the knowledge that you gained or the stories that you heard. It's about the action that you take. So make sure that as you've listened to Tammeca today, you do at least one thing, and you'll make her success story a part of your success story. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Budez. Sound editing by Mark Lamorjazy. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 Licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guest@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.